Welcome back to Geometry, Measurement, and Probability. In this video, we pick up in section 12.1 with side angle side congruence. So let's get started. For side angle side congruence, we have two sides of a triangle congruent to two sides of another triangle. And then the angle between those two sides, or what we call the included angle, is also congruent. Here's how this works. Look at example 4. We have two sides that are congruent, side of length 3, side of length 4, and then the angle between those two sides is congruent. So let's start naming our pieces, and remember that matching pieces need to be named in the same order. A and E match, so here segment AB would be congruent to segment ED. A and E match, B and D match. Notice my congruent symbol between the two line segments and the segment symbol above my letters. Angle B is congruent to angle D. That's our angle between our two sides. And then our second side that's congruent, side BC, is congruent to side DF. Again, congruent pieces are named in the same order. So triangle ABC is congruent to triangle EDF. A and E match, so they're named first. B and D match, so they're named second. And C and F are matching pieces, so they're named last. In example 5, we are asked to decide if each set of triangles is congruent. And then we give a reason for our answer, and we use our appropriate notation if our triangles are congruent. So notice here we have a side that's congruent, AC and FD. We have an angle, and then the next side is congruent. So we have a side, an included angle, and a side. So yes, these are congruent by side, angle, side. Again, notice that the angle is between the two sides. How I name my first triangle doesn't matter, so I'm going to name it triangle ABC. Then I look at my matching pieces. A and F match. Then B and E match, and C and D match. Look at part B. Here we have two small triangles and a big triangle. So let's focus on these two small triangles. Notice the single hash mark shows we have a side congruent. The double hash mark shows that a second side is congruent, and they share a side, so that would be congruent as well. So this would be side, 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 and yes, these are congruent. How I name my first triangle doesn't matter, so I'm going to name it XYW. Use your symbol for congruent, and then I start thinking about my matching pieces. X and Z match, Y matches Y, and W matches W. Look at part C. In part C, we have an angle, a side, and a side. Now notice the angle is not between the two sides here. So I do not have enough information to decide if these two triangles are congruent. That angle would need to be between the two sides. So let's talk about some other properties of triangles. Specifically, we're going to look at an isosceles triangle. Now, an isosceles triangle has two sides that are the same. These two sides are called the leg, and the other side is called the base. Now, the angles opposite the legs are congruent, what we call our base angles. So here, angle B is congruent to angle C. We have what's called an angle bisector. Now, an angle bisector divides an angle into two congruent parts. So here's an angle, and if I split that angle with a ray, I have what's called my angle bisector. You'll see your angle bisector here in blue. In an isosceles triangle, the angle bisector is also what we call the altitude of the triangle. So an altitude is perpendicular from a vertex to the opposite side of the triangle. So here's our triangle, and in blue I draw my altitude. Notice the right angle indicates the perpendicular. The three altitudes of a triangle intersect in one point.